So I'm joined now by Charlie Haffenden, a Premier League journalist and a podcaster for Let's Talk BHAFC. Charlie, I want to talk first of all about the World Cup. I've been doing a lot of research on McAllister for work, and a lot of the recurring theme is sort of the pride that Brighton had. I mean, I think it might have been the game against Liverpool where McAllister sort of was applauded onto the pitch and given a with his medal and kind of welcome back almost from the tournament. I'm not sure, but certainly, obviously, a huge moment for the club, seeing McAllister win it. So, what was that like? Because obviously Brighton, their rise has been relatively recent, I think it's fair to say. So what was it like to see a player from the club win the World Cup, but not only just be part of the squad, be a kind of a key figure within that achievement?
Oh, it's absolutely huge for the club. Even if he's not been there for that many years, he's not scored. He's scored a decent amount this season, not scored that many in the grand scheme of things, or made that many appearances really compared to some players in our recent history. But I think he has to go down as a bit of a club legend because he's won the World Cup. I mean, for a club of Brighton's size, you can't really argue with that. He's the first ever Brighton player to reach a World Cup quarter-final, semi-final, final, and then winner. So to go that far was amazing. And I think, to be honest, watching the World Cup final, I was more excited to see Mac Allister lift the trophy than I was England progressing, which felt really strange. But I just really wanted him to do it because he's such a great character. And I just thought he really deserved it. But the day you mentioned at the Amex, we got him a fake replica, but pretty good replica to be fair, on the pitch side. And he had his medals and he was showing it around to everybody, had a little mini trophy lift. And also when he returned to the dressing room, when he got back from his celebrations in Argentina, they had all the confetti in the dressing room with a fake trophy again, which was fantastic. So that just shows how much pride there was in him winning it. And even now, when he's going to Liverpool, to say that we've had a World Cup winner is amazing.
Yeah, I totally take your point because watching the final, I was sort of I was conflicted because I wanted, obviously, it was great to see Messi win the tournament, but also Canate was on the other side, so it was a little bit kind of conflicted there, and we were all, why hasn't he started the game? So we did have that kind of investment in it too. Obviously, McAllister much more sort of prominent with it, and I reckon from everything you sort of read, there is a real, you mentioned he's not been there that long, but there is a real affection there between sort of player and club. So it and there were sort of tears, weren't there, towards the end of the season when McAllister was, it was basically a poorly kept secret that he was going to leave. So it will be obviously tough for him to leave. But I want to talk about the transfer fee. It's not really been confirmed yet. It might not even be disclosed, but we're hearing that it's going to be in excess of 45 million is the phrase really. How do you feel about that? I mean, it seems like Brighton have essentially negotiated a clause or maybe been pushed to agree a clause where McAllister can leave for that amount, which again, maybe their hands were tied on that. But how do you feel about the fee, and what figure, if there was no clause, if it was ordinary circumstances, would you kind of have wanted before letting someone like McAllister go?
Yeah, it's a shame there is a clause, to be honest, because we talked about Caicedo in January when Arsenal and Chelsea were trying to sign him about 80 million, 75, 80 million, rejected flat out. I think it would have been a similar case for McAllister, especially with lots of interest around Europe and elsewhere in the Premier League. I think his heart is set on Liverpool, and that's why it's kind of moved that way quite quickly. But it would have probably been around 80 million, if I'm honest with you. As I said, a World Cup winner, not just got the medal, but played most of the minutes for Argentina this season for Brighton, an array of roles as well. We'll speak more of that in a bit. But yeah, for that reason and his versatility and his energy and his passion and his consistency as well, how much he offers, I think he's got to be worth around that. But obviously, the clause does exist. I'm not exactly sure what the figure is myself. But when he signed the new deal, must have been back in the autumn or around the World Cup time, that I knew that there was a clause added into there. It was just what the clause was, and it's quite a confusing one. The Athletic has been saying one thing, and the likes of Fabrizio Romano another. I think Athletic now claiming it's about 55 million, whereas other journalists saying about 45. So it's probably in that ballpark. And regardless, it's a huge bargain for Liverpool, and very sad for me, not just as a Brighton kind of journalist, but as a fan, to see him go for such a low figure in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and I guess from the Brighton standpoint, it looks like James Milner obviously coming in, having left Liverpool, Dahoud as well. I mean, I'm not sure if they'll necessarily be starting players, maybe more kind of depth players. So there will still be money there to obviously recruit with Brighton's sort of exceptional talent spotters, and then maybe in terms of the big kind of cash generator will be Caicedo, because like you say there, I mean, huge offers in January already, and probably just going to go upwards this summer, you would have thought. But you touched on it there in terms of Mac Allister's versatility. So, I mean, it's probably fair to say, and obviously, stop me if you disagree with this, that he is kind of primarily a number 8, but he's sort of sold as someone as well who can function as a number 6 and a number 10 as well. But a lot of the time when I hear about players being called versatile and being able to play different roles, I have a degree of skepticism, because there's a difference between playing different roles and excelling in different roles, basically. So how comfortable actually, is Mac Allister in those positions? Is he someone who can, Liverpool play this sort of double pivot? Could you see him in that role for Liverpool if Liverpool moved to a, say, 4-2-3-1? Could he be in that role behind the striker, or is he kind of very much at home, sort of as a number 8?
I think he's probably better a little bit further back, which is a bit ironic because defensively is maybe his weakness. He's not quite as good at tracking back and making those challenges. He definitely does it, but I think it's probably because he's alongside Caicedo that he doesn't look as good at it. But the fact he's got Caicedo there alongside him allowed him to kind of progress up the field and excel into that role as a number 6 or an 8. I think as a 6, as like a deep line playmaker, he really did well. I'd say maybe as a 10's his worst position, which might be a bit controversial, but I prefer him alongside Caicedo to get a little bit further forward, be the playmaker, and having someone like an Undav or a Buonanotte or an Enciso behind, whether it be Ferguson or Welbeck, just seem to fit a bit better. But it's not to say he can't play as a number 10. He's done very well in that position as well. It's just my preference was probably the 6 or an 8. 8 probably the very best of the lot. Yeah, he can excel in all those positions. He can. It's just probably more so a little bit further back.
So if we're talking about his kind of profile, if he is playing as a number 6, you sort of said deep line playmaker there. So if he was to play that role, you think it would have, at Liverpool, it'd probably have to be alongside Fabinho, do you think, just in terms of having that ball winner next to him?
Yeah, I was speaking to Redmen TV about this yesterday or day before, how Fabinho is not quite the same profile as Caicedo. He's nowhere near as mobile, and that does concern me.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to hinder Mac Allister too much, let's be honest, but he does thrive when he's got an energetic midfielder next to him, like a Caicedo. He's kind of the perfect example, one of the best in the world at the moment, in the Premier League, at doing his job, allow Mac Allister to shine through. It just take the pressure off him for having to defend too much. He could think more about looking up and picking the right pass, and he's very good at that. He might be a little bit patient sometimes. You might be a bit like, Mac Allister, what are you doing, mate? Pick up the speed a little bit, but he needs to pick up that right pass. It's not like he's dilly-dallying too much, but he's definitely patient in possession, as well as just, he can pick out really quick passes when he needs to. He's under pressure. I think he's one of the best actually in the Premier League when he's being pressured at keeping possession. So he's fine in those positions, but in terms of those killer passes, it sometimes takes a bit more of a look up. If that answers your question.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a lot sort of like Thiago, really, when I'm hearing you say it, just in the sense of he is someone who maybe will sort of slow the game down at times, but not necessarily in a negative way, more in a kind of controlling way. And maybe as well in terms of his profile as kind of, you wouldn't necessarily play Thiago as a lone number 6. You would have to have maybe that more sort of ball winner presence alongside him. And yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned as well in terms of Fabinho isn't necessarily doing the same things as Caicedo, so we'll have to obviously sort of cater to the balance. But it does look like Liverpool have basically earmarked that left side of number 8 role for him. It looks that's probably the most likely outcome at this point. So I wanted to touch on the weaknesses, but I guess we've already kind of covered it with the kind of defensive side of things. So let's finish by just covering Mac Allister as an individual, really. You mentioned there sort of how fondly he was welcomed back, how much he was sort of cheered on by everyone at Brighton. Liverpool have placed a lot of emphasis in their recruitment on recruiting the right characters. There's a sort of expletive that James Milner used to describe the policy that the club has when it comes to not signing certain players, maybe have egos that are too big. But what insight can you give us into Mac Allister, the individual, and
He's definitely not an ego player. He's more of a quite relaxed, humble guy. I mean, I don't know him personally, but that's the kind of the impression he gives
Mm.
off. He's always been very popular in the dressing room. Whenever Brighton's media have done any, they do quite fun quiz videos with the kit man and various bits and bobs like that. Very down to earth, he seems in that sense. He's not up himself. He's not overconfident. He just seems to be. He knows he's got the confidence on the field, but it's not in an arrogant way. He's also quite calm as well. He doesn't really get too riled up too easily. He definitely showed the odd bit of passion here and there, but he's
Yeah.
not your Neil Mopay or
Mm.
someone of that type. He's a bit more relaxed. He's Yeah, I think that's kind of the main points really. The relaxed, humble,
Yeah.
composed, very ambitious as well. He was respectful to Brighton in the way that he wanted to leave. Obviously, saw him crying at the game away at Aston Villa. That wasn't because they lost the game; they'd already achieved European football. It
Mm.
was just merely because he fell in love with the fan base, and he's very respectful of the city as well. And he's always had time for the fans. I've spotted him so many times signing, whether it be the programs or scarves and getting pictures. He was always making that time. He's one of those. So you're getting a fantastic individual as well as a brilliant player. I'm really going to miss him at Brighton, I must say.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll be one of those players. You see it sometimes. A player leaves, comes back to his old club, a few boos. But with Mac Allister, it feels like it is going to be a very good reception that he gets, especially being part of a historic achievement for Brighton this season in terms of qualifying for the Europa League.